we did something rather unique and fun last night as a family. We I, we've been unpacking all sorts of old boxes, going through them, and we're finding all our old ministry letters, all our old videotapes, cassette tapes of like different things, whether it's a radio interview or us speaking here or our singing tapes. We have all sorts
It's
of,
it's pretty crazy to think tapes were such a normal
uh,
thing back in the day. I mean, we've been married a little over 30 years. So going back to, the years right before we were married, everything was on a tape.
yeah. And last night, Hudson, of course, is all into these old things. So if it's like a video,
Well, he was the one who had a tape player. We
yeah,
wouldn't have had a way to listen to them,
yeah.
but he had one.
I haven't had a tape player in who knows how
So
long.
then one of our kids was trying to figure out how to get, navigate. And it's like you have to hit the rewind button.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a blast from the past. Like we have to go back
And you
30
have to
plus years.
wait for the whole thing to rewind before you can start playing. But that was really fun last night. We started to go through things, and I think we've said it in the past in these discussions that we're sort of going through a memory season, and it's more than just for our kids. It seems to be God's using it for us too, where we are remembering and recalling all the piles of stones that we have set in our life to say, don't forget this, don't forget this. And our kids are old enough now to really understand a lot more dimensionality of the decisions we made that led to the life we've lived, that led to the home that we built. So that's been uh, very powerful. Last night was unique. I don't even know how to describe it. We got out. We have so many pictures. We have so much. So we literally like just took a few things out of the closet that is still not even organized yet. It's just piles of things that we need to organize. But it's like we have photos. We have so many photos. They're overflowing out of the box. So we had to be watchful when we were taking the top things off that we didn't like have them all slide off. And so we had like pictures of when we first met, the
Mhm.
home group we were in when we first met that you used to play the piano for, which is now our piano in our living room.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's really crazy to think like our children are some of them are the same ages that we were when all of that was
yeah,
happening.
Hudson keeps mentioning that. It's like, I can't believe that daddy was like my age in this story or in this picture. And I think I feel the same way. I can't believe it either that he's as old as he is. But one of the things that I mean, there's a lot that we're going through that we wanted to sort of tie into this particular message. I'm thinking we might want to do this in two phases, two stages or two episodes, and that is to sort of bring up the idea of adoption, which is no small theme in our life. It has been a massive theme spiritually. It's huge because we're adopted into the family of God via our faith in Jesus Christ. We're grafted in. We're not biologically sons and daughters of God. We are grafted in and we become legal uh, children of the Most High God because of the shed blood of Jesus. And so, of course, that's huge in our life. But then we also have adopted 4 kids. And there's a lot that goes with the statement of we've adopted 4 kids. I mean, if you just say that, it's like in some obituary, and Eric Ludy died, and he adopted 4 kids. Whatever. It is a massive understatement of what that actually means in a life. It's different than an Eric started a business, or an Eric bought a car, or an Eric wrote a book. Those things are temporal, seasonal things that you could do and accomplish. But raising a child is very different. And raising a child that is not biologically yours adds a whole new dimensionality to what it means to raise a child.
Hmm.
And absolutely amazing. Like what we have tasted as far as the heart of God is on one side. On the other, the greatest challenge, the highest risk adventure that we've ever been on would be to adopt children. And so, if we were going to unpack that, I think if we could, maybe in a separate episode, we could go into the actual stories of our adoptions, because I think That would be a really fun thing for even for you and I to rekindle and to remember. But maybe today we can go through more of the global, because we just, ironically, right before we walked into this conversation, we were reading a book. We're doing it. We have a rough draft. Hudson and I are working on books to accompany our Dragon Mountain theater production that is going to be happening again, because it was last year too, but this next year. And so we have 3 books that we have written so far. We might even get a 4th one in, that are actual books of our characters that are writing a story. So we were just reading the book called The Doctrine of Exquisite Preciousness by Joe Hardy, who's
a character in Dragon
is a
Mountain.
character in
And
Dragon
really,
Mountain.
the doctrine of exquisite preciousness is basically the theme of the show, Dragon Mountain.
Yes.
It's really understanding the value of a life and what a life is worth. And I would say the show is such a parallel of a lot of the things we have learned through adoption. And when I think back to, because a lot of people ask, like, how did you decide to adopt, or what got you started on that path? And without going into all the stories, I know that there was a very specific time in our lives where we freshly awakened to the preciousness of children. And we had Hudson, and he was 2, and loved being a parent, and he was a lot of fun. And then we had a miscarriage. And so our second child we lost when it was only about 6 weeks into the pregnancy or something, 7 weeks maybe. But it was still just very jarring. And I think at first you kind of have this thought like, well, it could have been a lot more traumatic if the child had been further along, or if you gone all the way to term and then lost your child or whatever. But at the same time, after a few weeks of letting it sink in that this life had been lost, I think both of us really went through a deep grieving process. And that is what awakened us to adoption. That's what showed us because at the same time we were walking through the grief of losing a child, we were also studying the need of vulnerable children around the world. Those 2 areas just paralleled at the same time. And so instead of looking at the statistics of all the orphans or all the needy, vulnerable children that are out there, or instead of just seeing the need kind of from a distance, it was hitting really close to home, because we began to recognize the grief, the agony, the burden that we feel over this one lost unborn life that a lot of people would just say, well, that doesn't even
just move
matter.
on. Just move on.
And we were realizing the heart of God for that life was, so much more of a grief than even what we were feeling, because he had a purpose and an intent for that life, and it was prematurely cut off, and just how important every single life is to him. So I remember hearing this statistic somewhere in that time that there were 140 something million,
43 million
orphans in the world. And that's a staggering number. It's almost a number that you can't even wrap your head around, because you think, how can you even make a difference when the number is that big? And then just understanding that God doesn't see that number. He sees the individual child, every single individual child, and they are so important and so precious to him. And through the loss of our child, I think we gained his heart for how precious every life is. And that's how we had to approach every one of our adoptions. And each one of them really just fell into our lap. It was a supernatural story, but it was God showing us how precious these lives are that other people would disregard. And that's the theme of Dragon Mountain. So it is a time, appropriate topic.
Yeah, it just seemed like as we were heading over here to record, and by the way, for those of you that were watching the videos of these in the first episodes, I don't know, the first 10 episodes we had video, we've dismantled our studio, and so we're in a transition, and because of your neck challenges, we don't have a video setup yet. Like Nathan and I can still do our old video setup, which is still working fine, but we haven't quite solved that. So
yeah, I can't turn my head and look at you for a long period of
so
time. I have to be staring straight.
We don't know how to do what we're doing right now in a video and make it actually an attractive video. Let's just put it that way.
We'll get there again. We'll get there. We just have to.
It is nice not having to be on video, though.
Yeah,
don't you wish you could do all your things without a video camera on you? Because it is more relaxing and natural, I think, to talk without a camera in your face. But it's fascinating that we were just doing this right before we came over, and so the theme is very fresh in our mind. I mean, this little book that goes with the Joe Hardy character, it would be fascinating to even trying to think what would be, because I feel like it could be good to describe Dragon Mountain, which is the theater show that, like, take a couple steps back. We have a desire as parents to invest in our kids. We don't know what this is going to look like for each, but this has been our goal, is to invest in our kids in such a way that we can help them start a business/ministry and sort of get them started, to utilize the strength, whatever strength we have, to help them sort of get those wheels turning. And so Hudson's our first child in this whole process, and he was originally interested in filmmaking, so we would have him on film shoots and various things. And that didn't take as much as the theater side of his life. When he was traveling with Arise Collective Theater,
I think he just loves creating story. He
yeah,
loves taking people on a journey, and that's hard to do in film. There's so
yeah,
much. I mean, unless you're the writer
it's the
of the
finished
script.
product of film
Yeah.
can do that, but the process of filmmaking is very
It's very tedious. It's
different.
very detail oriented and just not as much
And you don't
creative.
interact with your audience. I think
Right.
he loved when we were going to these film shoots at the same time he was traveling in this theater company, and he was contrasting the difference. One, he's able to tell an entire story in one
Hmm.
night in front of a live audience and get real world feedback. And I think comparatively, he was just so attracted to that in his disposition. So one day he was like, I don't want to make films anymore. I actually want to make theater. And so that was a unique one. And we have a chapel. So we've sort of gone on this adventure with him. 2 years ago, he did a show called Commissioned.
Hmm.
And that was really special for us to walk through.
Just highlighting key moments in heroes of the faith, their
Yeah.
lives, and just turning point moments for them, which was really special for me because I love heroes of the faith, and I don't feel like we as a modern church know the stories as well as we should of just the great Christians that have gone before us. So that was really special. It was definitely a experiment. When none of us really had any idea what we were doing, but I think all of us are committed to something that's very high quality, something that is not distracting because it's low quality. So I think that's
If we
the
could
biggest.
put up with low quality, our
It'd
life
be
would be
easier.
a lot easier.
But I think Hudson, you and me all
Yeah.
have that standard.
Yeah,
So the last thing we want is some kind of cheesy church play. And I'm sure a lot of people have been impacted by cheesy church plays. We just can't do
for
that.
all of you that are making cheesy church
Yeah,
plays, I'm sure they're
we
still
honestly
impacted.
it's not
Yeah.
in our blood to do that. So it
Yeah.
has to be very well done.
which is a challenge when you have that issue. So this last year, Hudson and I were working on a new show, which was he wants to move into musicals, and this was still not a musical yet because the complexity of building a great world-class show is hard enough, let alone to add music to it. That's a whole nother dimension that we're still working on, possibly for his next show. But it was called Dragon Mountain, and so the two of us wrote this together. And it has a character in it named Joe Hardy, and he's the father character in it. And I don't want to give anything about the story away, but I think it might help to just know that this character's in it. And he's a very, very significant player in the story, even though he's really not present. Well, he is. Okay, I won't say
you're giving.
Yeah, I'm
You
giving
might
too
be
much away.
giving spoilers.
Yeah, okay, so I won't say anything else. So when we're writing this guy in the story is going to adopt 4 kids. No,
3.
3. 3 kids before they age out of foster care, so the older kids. And Hudson and I weren't originally writing this because we both have a background in adoption, him being a sibling and us being parents. That wasn't like our motive. It just happened to really match the story well. But in the process, it's interesting because that part of the story is really going to become very dear to us and very special to us because we have such a deep identification with it. But we had a design that, Ben Price down in Australia was going to play Joe Hardy. And how we were going to do that, we didn't know yet, but that was our goal. And so we sort of wrote it for an Australian actor. He was going to be sort of like Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, because he's a TV. This character in the show is a TV personality. He has a show called Saltworthy Adventures, and he's like Steve Irwin. He's an adventurer. And it didn't work with Ben to do it, so we were shopping around looking for others. Never once, and I could say this for you too, did we think of me doing that part.
No, I mean, I think you have done one or two things that involved acting. I mean, well, I remember back way before we were in a relationship, we were in an Easter play
Yeah.
together at our church, and it
I
was
wouldn't call that
definitely,
acting.
yeah,
No, that's me walking on a stage and I was singing,
yeah.
so it's like to call that acting is
But
a
it
little
was that
different.
you wore like the
No,
costume
I
of the,
did. I did.
the Jerusalem person from,
But
but then you were in a cameo in one of the Kendrick movies.
yeah,
And that was, I think the whole family laughs about that because you're supposed to be in the crowd at a
supposed
basketball
to be. I
game.
am in the
You're
crowd.
in the crowd. You're supposed to be a character who's like all mad that the basketball team
Oh,
is like
disappointed.
losing.
I'm seriously disappointed. And they just have, because when you're doing something like that for a movie, did it for 7 hours. So the amount of takes that were taken is, I mean, just ridiculous how many takes there were. And the one they picked, and that's why I want to defend myself, the one they picked was not my best moment.
So when we went to the theater to see you, there you are on the screen, and you're doing your one little moment of like acting sad or disappointed, and it was just it didn't. We didn't think you pulled it
Okay,
off.
so everyone in my family, and I have to admit, including me, does not think that I should do this part. Okay,
Yeah,
and
because all we've seen
is the acting in
is
the
the
back of that
cameo
movie.
or
Yeah,
the crowd shot and
yeah,
then the Easter play from back in the day. So
yeah.
we just didn't feel like it was a good idea because we thought, well, in all fairness, I don't think the acting was as much of a concern as much as people getting distracted by
Yeah.
like, oh, there's Eric Ludy,
Yeah.
dressed
What's
up
he
in a
doing up
hat.
there? Yeah.
What's he doing?
So when all of our options fell through, I still remember that we would have looked at it as a dark moment as we're staring around the room going, well, who else could do it? And it's funny because none of us, including me, thought it was a good idea for me to do it, but it just sort of was obvious that God was setting it there. And we're like, no, 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 no. And yet in hindsight, me being in that role was one of the most significant things that has happened in my life. And it's just interesting that having an acting role could actually play a part
Well, it
in
was
in
pretty
my
profound.
development.
It ended up being very profound
Yeah.
because I think Joe Hardy and the truths that he expresses through his life in the show are the truths that God has taught us through
Yeah.
adoption. And even having Harper, who's one of our adopted kids, play one of the adopted kids in the show
Yeah.
is and Hudson too, but
Yeah.
especially Harper because she was adopted, was extremely profound.
Well, the first night I walk out at the end and I just was crying. I was so moved by this truth that was coming forth. It's interesting how theater can present something that is very raw, real, human, but it adds an extra gloss to it, almost like a shimmer, like that movie surrealness to it. And it causes things to be driven deeper. Art has a fascinating impact. I've always been fascinated by that. Like a song, you could say the same words, read the lyrics, but then when you put it in and you sing it and you add that dimensionality to it, it can hit you in a deeper level. And that's exactly what this did. Opening night of Dragon Mountain, it still ranks as one of the most significant and powerful nights that I can remember for multiple reasons. It's a family reason, and mainly it was just to see Hudson pull that off. I mean, he was directing it, he was acting it. It was a very hard job.
It turned out really well done. It was very well done. Really powerful, really high quality, really just an amazing production, really. But I think the theme that came through so strongly, we were just hoping, I think the first night, I hope people understand the script and the story, because you never really know how it's going to translate. And because it was all original, it's not like we had any test runs of this. But what came through so clearly was the doctrine of exquisite preciousness, that lives that other people would disregard are so valuable to God and should be so valuable to us. And I think for me, too, as an adoptive parent, just realizing that it's all worth it. All of the challenges of adoption, it's still the heart of God, even though adoption does cause you to have to go through things you would never expect. I think, I remember going to an orphan and adoption conference before we ever adopted any of our kids and hearing these, and there was a lot of negativity, I think, just a lot of human fleshly perspective on it, but it was like, just don't think that you're going to bring these kids in and just love them and they're going to turn out fine. They're going to be a mess and they're going to mess up your life and all these things. And I remember feeling like really disturbed by
Uh-huh.
that mindset. At the same time, you can't just go into adoption with
Yeah.
this starry-eyed vision of like, oh, we will never have any
Mhm.
challenges. And I think, there are unique challenges, and we have had them with every single one of our
Mhm.
adopted kids, and things that have we never expected we would have to go
Yeah.
through. Because we've had them all since they were really little and
Mhm.
poured into them since they were very little. Different than the Joe
Mhm.
Hardy ones, which were,
Mhm.
the fictional characters. They're like older kids who've
Yeah.
had these traumatic
Yeah.
backgrounds. With our adopted kids, what we've discovered is that there are just things that come with the territory, whether it's generational strongholds and issues in their lives, or just different, like you would say, different sin packages, like
Mhm.
things that we can't relate to because they're not things we ever struggled with.
Yeah.
They're things that they struggle with, maybe because of their culture or their heritage or just spiritual influences in their lives. So all of the things we've gone through in adoption, there have been moments where we've thought, is this doing any good? Is this making any difference in their lives? And was this a mistake, but is this, we're getting more than we bargained for, is kind of how it
Mhm.
has felt at times when we're kind of going through something hard. And that the Dragon Mountain show really just solidified that yes, it is worth it. And yes, it is making an eternal impact, even if you don't see all of the fruit right now. It
Mhm.
is the heart of God, and you have the blessing of God flowing through you when you
Mhm.
say yes. Not that everyone's called to adopt, but it really just solidified the value of saying yes to that calling for us.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is maybe we unpack the actual stories next week. What I'd love to finish with, in fact, I was saying right before um, we went into this, we weren't talking about this. We were talking about my office, and I have this space on the wall that I've been trying to figure out what I should put up there. And I was thinking of actually putting this up there, which is at the end of Dragon Mountain. It's called the Doctrine of Exquisite Preciousness, and this is it. So I think this could be a pretty special way to end. That which is unlovely is loved. That which is unholy is pursued. That which is unrighteous is suffered for. That which is unworthy is died for. That which is weak is rescued. And that which the world considers nothing is exquisitely precious.